You probably filled it this morning. You scooped the seed, hung the feeder back on the same hook by the window, and pretty soon the regulars showed up. The chickadees first, then the finches, a pair of cardinals at dusk. It feels like one of the kindest things you do all day. A small, steady act in a hard season, given to creatures who never asked for it and can't pay you back. And most days, that's exactly what it is. But down under all that seed, in the damp corner where the hulls pile up and the rain never quite drains, something else can be going on. Something you can't see from your chair. The feeder you think of as a gift can slowly become the one spot in your whole yard, where illness passes from one bird to the next. That's not a reason to take it down today. It's a reason to learn what a healthy feeder looks like, and what a struggling one is trying to tell you. The signs usually show up early, right at your window, in birds you already know by sight, as long as you know how to read them. If you're the kind of person who notices which chickadee comes first, and which junco waits its turn, you're in the right place. This channel is for people who feed the birds, and want to do it well, who'd rather understand their yard than just decorate it. If that sounds like you, subscribing means more quiet, honest looks at the lives happening just past your glass. No alarms, no exaggeration. Just the real story told plainly. And near the end, I'll share the one move that feels completely backwards, the thing that seems unkind, but is actually the most caring choice you can make for a flock that started to struggle. A lot of people get it wrong, with the best of intentions. Let's start with the crowd. Out in the wild, no bird builds a place like your feeder. In the woods and along the field edges, food is scattered, a seed head here, a few berries there, an insect tucked under loose bark. Birds spread out to find it, and that spreading keeps them apart for most of the day. A feeder flips that around. It takes 20, 30, 40 birds that would normally forage across acres and gathers them onto one small platform, side by side, morning to dusk, day after day. That's wonderful for you. It's the whole reason you get to watch them. But it's also the exact condition illness needs most. Many birds, one surface, again and again. When researchers talk about why feeders matter to bird health, this is usually where they begin. Not with the seed, with the crowd. Your kindness creates a closeness these birds would rarely have in the wild, and in nature, closeness tends to cut both ways. Now picture a pine siskin in February, a small, streaky brown finch with a hint of yellow in the wing, the kind that floods in some winters and skips others entirely. In the winters they do arrive, they pack onto feeders by the dozen, shoulder to shoulder. And in some of those years, something moves quietly through them, a bacterial infection called salmonella. It spreads in a plain, unglamorous way, through droppings. A sick bird perches on the tray, leaves traces behind in its waste, and the next bird feeds right there in it. The seed becomes the path the illness travels. The infected bird doesn't fly off to hide somewhere private. It usually does the opposite. It sits puffed up and slow, lingering long after the others have scattered, simply because it's too weak to do anything else. That stillness can look almost peaceful from your window. It rarely is. The closest human word for it is exhaustion. Have you ever seen a house finch at your feeder with one eye swollen nearly shut, crusted, reddened, the feathers around it matted and wrong? If you have, you've already met one of the most closely watched feeder illnesses on the continent. It comes from a stubborn little microbe with a long Latin name. The people who track it just call it house finch eye disease. It passes along when bird after bird presses its face to the same feeding port, the same perch, the same rim, spread through nothing more than contact. The infection swells the eyes until the bird can barely see. And a finch that can't see, can't spot a hawk, can't find wild food away from the feeder, can't last very long. It tends to hit house finches hardest. The cheerful red-washed males and the streaky brown females that probably visit you every single day. So when you notice a swollen-eyed finch staying close to the glass, you're not imagining it, and you're not being squeamish. You're seeing the early chapter of something real. Now think about the bottom of the feeder. the part you almost never actually look at. Seed that didn't get eaten settles there. Rain works its way in, or snow melts down into it, and damp seed clumps together and stays put. Within a few days, mold can take hold, and some of those molds release spores that birds breathe in while they feed. The lungs of a small bird are delicate, and a heavy dose of those spores can make them sick. The same slow rot builds up in the wet pile of hulls on the ground below, where the ground feeders work. Juncos, mourning doves, native sparrows, picking through everyone's leftovers. A feeder that looks perfectly fine from 10 feet away can be quietly spoiling at its base, out of sight. This is the part of bird feeding nobody photographs and nobody puts on a postcard. It's also the part that quietly decides whether your feeder is helping or hurting. You scrubbed the feeder, but did you ever think about the bird bath? Water is the piece almost everyone forgets, and it can carry illness just as easily as seed. When birds drink and bathe in the same shallow dish all week, they leave behind a lot more than a few loose feathers. There's a throat infection that passes through dirty water and food, and it falls hardest on doves and finches. The mourning dove at the edge of the bath, the house finch on the rim. It raises sores in the mouth and throat until the bird can no longer swallow, and it slowly weakens with food sitting right in front of it. That's a hard thing to picture, and I won't pretend otherwise. But it's exactly why the bird bath deserves the same care you'd give the feeder. Fresh water, changed often, in a basin you genuinely clean, not just topped up for a month at a time. Water you put out to help them only helps if it stays clean enough to drink. Here's where most of us get gently fooled, so it's worth slowing down. A bird sitting still, fluffed into a round little ball, looks cozy. It looks settled and content, maybe even glad to be there. We glance out and read it as a creature at peace. But a fluffed-up bird in the middle of the day, eyes half closed, slow to react, staying put while the rest of the flock comes and goes, is very often a bird that isn't well. Fluffing traps body heat, and a sick bird runs cold and tired, so it puffs out its feathers to hold on to whatever warmth it has left. So watch for the one that doesn't burst away when the others do. Notice the closed eyes at noon. Pay attention to the bird that lets you walk closer than any healthy wild thing ever would. Tameness in a wild bird is hardly ever trust. Far more often it's weakness wearing trust's face. Learning to tell those two apart is the whole skill. And it's the difference between catching this early and missing it until it's too late. So what do you actually do about all this? Start with a rhythm. Take the feeder down on a schedule. Every 2 weeks is a sensible baseline. And more often in summer heat or whenever the feeder's especially busy. And give it a proper clean, not a quick shake over the lawn. Knock off the stuck seed and the droppings, then soak it in a weak bleach solution. Roughly 1 part bleach to 9 parts water is what wild bird health groups recommend. Rinse it well, and let it dry all the way through before you refill it, because damp is half of every problem we've talked about. Rake up the soggy hulls underneath while you're out there. And here's the part I promised you, the one that feels backwards. If you spot a sick bird, or worse, more than one, the kindest thing you can do is take the feeder down for a week or 2. I know how that sounds. Every instinct says a struggling flock needs more food, not less. But the feeder is the gathering point. And the gathering point is what spreads the illness. Take it away and the birds disperse, back to foraging the way they would in the wild. Spread out, apart, and far safer for it. You're not abandoning them. You're breaking the chain that's making them sick. Put it back up, freshly cleaned, once the sick birds have moved on. And you've turned the single riskiest spot in your yard back into the safest one. So tomorrow morning, when you fill it again and hang it on that same hook by the window, you'll be looking a little differently. Not with worry, with attention. You'll notice the bird that sits too still. You'll notice that damp corner you used to ignore. And you'll understand that the kindness was never only the seed. It was the care standing behind it. A clean feeder is a quiet promise you keep to birds who can't thank you and don't know your name, and somehow that makes it count for more, not less. I'd love to hear from you on this one. How often do you really clean yours, honestly? And has there ever been a bird at your feeder you could just tell, somehow, wasn't right? Tell me about it below. I read these, and I think about them. Until next time, keep watching closely, keep that feeder clean, and take good care of the small lives that have decided your yard is home.